Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the ND Colloquy. Today's session is on locality development compacts and the way forward. Here are some of the collaborations of TRI along with TRI Centers of Excellence and Associations. More details on each of these will be provided at the chat and the end of the session. We now have a video on Rajpur intervention of TRI.
मध्य प्रदेश के बड़वानी जिले की राजपुर तहसील प्राकृतिक संसाधनों से भरा पूरा इलाका है, लेकिन यहाँ आजीविका के अभाव में पलायन, शिक्षा और स्वास्थ्य सेवाओं में कमी जैसी कई समस्याएं भी हैं। इनका समाधान पंचायतों के माध्यम से भी हो सकता है, लेकिन जागरूकता के अभाव में समुदाय, खासतौर से महिलाओं और कमजोर परिवारों की भागीदारी ग्राम सभाओं में बहुत कम रही है।
पहले सब भाइयों ने ऐसा बोलती थी कि क्यों जाएंगे ग्राम सभा में, आदमी उनकी मीटिंग रहती है, अपना क्या काम उसमें।
आदमी लोग जाने नहीं देता था, आशा रखता था।
ग्राम सभा में लोगों की भागीदारी बढ़ाने और स्थानीय स्वशासन को मजबूत करने के लिए पिछले 3 सालों से अजीम प्रेमजी फिलेंथ्रोपिक इनिशिएटिव्स के सहयोग से ट्रांसफॉर्मिंग रूरल इंडिया के नेतृत्व में विशेषज्ञ संस्थाओं के साथ एक साझा प्रयास किया जा रहा है। शुरुआत में मध्य प्रदेश राज्य ग्रामीण आजीविका मिशन द्वारा पहले से गठित महिला स्व सहायता समूहों के साथ संवाद किया गया। इसके बाद ग्राम संगठनों को मजबूत किया गया। समूह और संगठनों में सक्रिय महिलाओं का चयन कर उन्हें सचेत दीदी के रूप में पहचान दी गई। प्रत्येक गांव में स्वास्थ्य तथा पोषण, शिक्षा, स्वशासन तथा पारदर्शिता और आजीविका के मुद्दे पर 2-2 सचेत दीदियां काम कर रही हैं। मुद्दों की समझ बनाने, ग्राम विकास योजना बनाने और पंचायत तथा ग्राम सभा में सक्रिय भागीदारी के लिए विशेषज्ञ संस्थाओं द्वारा लगातार प्रशिक्षण दिया जा रहा है। अब तक ग्राम संगठनों के 660 सदस्यों, 542 सचेत दीदियों, स्व सहायता समूहों के 5104 सदस्यों, 882 पंचायत प्रतिनिधियों के साथ साथ विभागों के जमीनी कर्मचारियों को प्रशिक्षित किया गया है। ग्राम सभाओं में समुदाय की भागीदारी बढ़ाने के लिए रैलियां और नाटक भी आयोजित किए जा रहे हैं। अब पंचायत की तीनों स्थायी समितियों, सामान्य एवं प्रशासन समिति, निर्माण एवं विकास समिति और शिक्षा, स्वास्थ्य एवं समाज कल्याण समिति सहित गांव की अन्य समितियां भी सक्रिय हुई हैं।
पंचायत मीटिंग लगा 5 तारीख हर महीना हम मीटिंग में जाने लग गया।
पहले ग्राम विकास योजना सरकार की बजट आधारित योजनाओं को ध्यान में रखकर पंचायतें अपने स्तर पर बना लेती थीं।
अभी तक ग्राम पंचायती कार्य योजना बनाती थी अपनी, अब पूरी ग्राम सभा इसमें सम्मिलित होती है और समितियों का भी पूरी राय ली जाती है और समूह की दीदियों द्वारा कार्य योजना बनाया गया है।
हम ग्राम सभा में जाती हैं महिलाएं और अपनी अपनी मोहल्ले की परेशानियां बताते हैं और वहां पर अनुमोदन करवाते हैं।
गांव के काम के लिए विभागों में पंचायत प्रतिनिधियों के साथ साथ ग्राम संगठन की महिलाएं भी आती हैं।
जो मुद्दे ग्राम सभा में हल हुए उनको ग्राम सभा में करे और जो ग्राम सभा से बाहर के थे उसके लिए फिर हम सभी मिलकर जनपद तक गए।
ग्राम में काम की प्रगति और सेवाओं की निगरानी का काम ग्राम संगठन की सदस्यों, सचेत दीदियों और जागरूक युवाओं द्वारा किया जाता है। मुद्दों पर प्राथमिकता से काम होने से अब गांव में बदलाव दिखाई दे रहे हैं। इस प्रयास में समुदाय, खासतौर से महिलाओं और पंचायतों के बीच बेहतर सामंजस्य स्थापित हुआ है, जो कि स्थानीय स्वशासन को सशक्त करने की दिशा में सकारात्मक कदम है। अगले साल पलायन और रोजगार जैसे मुद्दों के साथ साथ नवनिर्वाचित महिला पंचायत प्रतिनिधियों को ज्यादा मुखर बनाने के लिए केंद्रित प्रयास किए जाएंगे, क्योंकि अब जरूरत है महिलाओं।
Sorry, internet lag.
और रोजगार जैसे मुद्दों के साथ साथ नवनिर्वाचित महिला पंचायत प्रतिनिधियों को ज्यादा मुखर बनाने के लिए केंद्रित प्रयास किए जाएंगे, क्योंकि अब जरूरत है महिलाओं के इस मनोबल को लगातार आगे बढ़ाने की।
Hosted by Professor Walton, Harvard Kennedy School, this session will draw insights from leading practitioners and thought leaders on what the emergence on fertile grounds in form of community-based organization and panchayat mean for rural India. The panelists have a fund of deep experience, a body of work, and commitment to transform the emerging rural and fading rural as a habitat for a better, productive, healthy life of learning and meaning. I'll now request Neha to take the session forward.
Thanks, Charvi. Hi, good evening all, good morning, good afternoon, as the case may be. I'm Neha and heartily welcomes all our respected panelists, wonderful participants and all in the series of conversations happening under India Rural Colloquy. And today's colloquy is about an emerging phenomena around locality development compacts. Friends, I myself see this session as an inspiration for me as I lived this experience with success and learnings, and definitely with a deep commitment. I'm personally looking forward to learning and strengthening our approach of locality, or we also call it as neighborhood development, and taking it across India. If we talk about what is locality-based approach and why this is powerful to strengthen local economy, society, and habitats. Many of us might be aware of governments in Scotland, Canada have creatively used this framework of for community rejuvenation, mobilization, and infusing new vitality and delivering comprehensive habitat services. I also draw inspiration from what India had some 2600 years back before advent of modern state, the Vajian Confederacy, centered around modern day Vaishali, which had commoners, nobility, guilds coming together to solve their problems and negotiate with external powers. And that's what make them one of the powerful Mahajanpadas of ancient India. Similarly, during pandemic, we had women collectives, local panchayats, frontline health worker, frontline health service providers, administrations who come together to build the safe and healthy bubble as migrants returned. They only managed their local isolation, quarantined them, educated each other for so-called COVID appropriate new norm, fed each other, and so on. Today, we have unprecedented opportunity and enabling framework for CBO, community-based organization, and Panchayati Raj institutions that coexist in the form of joint communication from Ministry of Panchayati Raj and Ministry of Rural Development on poverty reduction plans. We at TRI, in collaboration of SRLM, and with the support of Azim Premji Foundation, have developed a comprehensive application on Gram Panchayat development plans, which actually feed through multi-sectoral village development plans. And these plans are actually prepared by community and local representatives. And this plan has the amalgamation of entitlement action plans, community action plan, their village infrastructure plans, their own livelihood plans, village health plans, school development plans. So a very comprehensive kind of plan it is, which feed these Gram Panchayat development plans. At two of the poorest districts in Madhya Pradesh, Jhabua and Badwani, we are experiencing it and realized that is actually the creation of robust spine of locality compact of what we call the CBO, PRI, and local administration, which is now evolving as the solution around facilitating energy, a kind of synergy for proactive local collaborated action amongst and within citizens, local government, and government systems. So coming to the panel, it is most gratifying that in our panel we have Zulfi, and I really thanks to him on behalf of TRI that the movie which we have saw just now, Rajpur, is prepared under his guidance, and he is been a kind of mentor for this overall program. So Zulfi, who has established his strategic leadership in steering the meaningful programs for strengthening local governance, community development, fostering livelihoods, and much more. We have been benefited immensely with this experience, both with policy and planning around GPs and abroad. He brings today his deep knowledge on nurturing local democracy as the tool for triggering multi-dimensional change at village and panchayat level. In the panel, we have Harsh. He has been the champion of habitat development approaches, which addresses the human capital economic development. His book, Navodaya Shahar Model, is must read. And in fact, we are also using it in our urban work. As we speak for the next panelist, Medha, who is building one of India's most interesting initiative for rapid augmentation of frontline health infrastructure. Apart from various existing projects at Gates Foundation, she is working on deploying 15th FCE grants resources, closely working with the health and panchayat system to augment the facilities in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. And we have Gaurav here, who is Director Operations at TRI. He actually designed and led with our colleagues in Badwani what we have come to know as the Rajpur model. He will share practical insights on building locality development compacts and the outlier results visible in a short time. And to intertwine all these conversations, we have one of the best minds globally thinking on these issues, Professor Michael Walton. And today he will host this excellent panel and steer discussions to show us a pathway for translating these insights, building on the institutional innovation momentum, legitimized and expanded during pandemic containment, and the global narratives of localization of SDGs into a coherent action plan, which we could actually bring it in our practice. So, Professor Walton, this session is in your steering control now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neha. It's great to be here with everybody. I'm actually in the United States now. I'm sorry I'm not in India with the panel and where most probably of the participants are. I very much like the way that this panel has been framed, because I think it is engaging with one of the toughest and most interesting development problems, not only in the US, but also in terms of global experience. It's both a very contemporary problem and it's also an old problem. Well, Neha referred to a long way earlier where there's experience, but certainly it's been, the kinds of issues have been central for the last several decades in the development business. And I characterize it as a question of how to get dynamic social and economic development at the local level. And this has proved to be, in many areas, one of the hardest problems to solve. It is sometimes characterized around issues of frontline delivery of services. That's part of it, but it's really much more complex than that, because it's fundamentally about changing the interactions in the local economic, social, and political system. I think I suggest a view, which I think is held here and which I hold to, is that for this to work, it's important to have effective interactions between how the government, the state works, how the local political system works, and how communities work, with civil society being partly in the community and playing a potential intermediary role. Of course, there's also a role for the private sector, but that's not the focus of today's discussion. But I think a really important learning that I get from the global experience as well as the India experience is that just working on one of those, state, community and civil society, politics alone, will often be insufficient and is often disappointing. I think there's been romanticism in all areas, romanticism about what the state can do, just pushing things down to the front line, romanticism that if you just have new democratic processes, that's very important in India, they don't automatically transform local functioning, and romanticism both about community and civil society, that you can't just empower, quote, communities and stuff happens. And this is why I like the way this session has been formulated and where I think a lot of the debate is now. And that is, there has to be proactive creation of the spaces around the interaction between state and community, state and politics, across this triangle of interactions. And that this is something that isn't easy. It's an area where there has to be exploration, discovery of the varieties of ways where you can find levers for change in what is an issue of changing local systems in ways that matter. Of course, resources matter. And we're going to hear about very specifically later about, well, there are many initiatives that India has, and a very recent one from the 15th Finance Commission about pushing resources down for health. But resources alone are not enough. It has to be linked to changes in behavior of all of the actors and to discover what does and doesn't work. And I would actually acknowledge that the state has so much that it has to do to get done. Bureaucrats have to get things done. They have to reach targets. That's why creating spaces for exploration are very important. And that's where I think philanthropy can play a specific role, supporting the kinds of explorations and experimentations that then the state and the political system can take on. So with that introduction, I'm very much looking forward to the contributions of the panelists. We're going to have Zulfika first, followed by Gaurav, then Harsh, then Meda. So Zulfi, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so I think the context has been set well, and that small film we saw from Rajpur tells us about the kind of initiative that is taking place. Let me just go a little one step back and yeah, I mean, say that, what just Michael spoke about, I'm taking off from there and saying, see, while one may not want to romanticize any individual piece, which is absolutely true, we need to figure out how this kind of a dance between multiple institutions needs to play, and so that it becomes like an orchestra and something that wonderful comes out of it. One challenge that we have been seeing is in the country historically, if you look at the 5-year plan periods and how historically our bureaucracy has functioned, how our state has functioned, resources, processes of planning and decision making used to be very, very centralized. And we have been making some movement forward towards decentralization, recognizing how complex India as a society is, such differences in culture, norms, communities, languages. The idea that even, a state government can sit and decide on what happens in a location is obviously very, very odd. So, we come to the point of the 73rd Amendment, the 74th Amendment, We have the PESA Act later, and then we have the Community Forest Rights Act, some of the seminal movement forward towards recognizing community rights, toward devolution, towards a more decentralized form of governance. Two things which my senses are standing out in our country and its context is the need for deepening democracy. I mean, the democracy is not necessarily natural, and in so many of our neighboring states, states, countries, we can find that that's a liberal democratic framework is not necessarily a default position every country adopts. We have taken it, and if we want to take it to the logical conclusion, we need to work towards deepening of democracy, which is what the Constitution and many of these laws that I just talked about profess to do. At the local level, let me just go. What are the few continued challenges that we face? Given that we are a hierarchical society, we also have caste and various other kind of divisions, ethnicity, religion, language. There is significant mass marginalization as a result of this. People lack voice. Those who are marginalized, poor, or vulnerable for other reasons don't carry voice. In our imagination of this local democratic processes, be it the Gram Panchayat, the Gram Sabha, or in urban centers where the story is even far, far poor. And we have a big challenge of having accountability of all the functionaries to the people. The basic social compact in a democratic society is of the primacy of citizens. And the state and the government functionaries are the principal agent relationship. They are agents. It is the citizens who is the principal. We have created the laws. We have elected people to say, now you please go and work on our behalf. You make the necessary laws, and you please employ the competent people in your various services, the bureaucratic department, to now make those things happen. Unfortunately, this compact is not a reality on the ground in India. And the day it happens, we will have a revolution. We will see a different world, a utopian world we will reach. So we are far from it. But on the other hand, we have a situation from our bureaucracy, again tempered by the history of elitism, caste, class, where we have bureaucratic inefficiency, where there is a lack of basic performance management systems and being able to hold of duty bearers accountable to say, have you done your job well? Lant Pritchett, one of my professors at Kennedy School, and Michael will know him very well. He had a stint as I think the chief economist of the World Bank in India for some time, and there was an interesting survey done, and he came up with this term of the India as a flailing state, and flailing in the sense that the head has no control over its arms and lengths. Our ability to put a drop of vaccine in a mouth of a child, which is a very simple act. We have done decent, but we have done still quite poorly in terms of the complexity of the task and just being able to, get it done. At least I think in 15 years back, our indicators were equivalent to Haiti. I mean, which is considered like, one of the gone cases as far as state formation is concerned. So in this whole, let's say, the situation that we are facing, yeah, I'm just, just hold a second. So, where does the role of civil society therefore comes in? I'm just trying to locate in the story the role of civil society and what you saw in Rajput TRIF playing. I think in this, given this context, I think the key role is to work towards strengthening individual and collective leadership, collective citizenship. And as I talked about the social compact, I think the notion of us as citizens is not yet established well. If you look at Gram Sabha, or if you look at Panchayat and look at citizens, people have been reduced to petitioners. हम अर्जी लगाते हैं, you beg, you go and you're a supplicant, you apply, say, we hope something can happen. We go and, genuflect in front of officials to say what should be your right and what should be the job of a duty bearer that's not how it functions, right? So given the marginalization, I think one of the role of civil society is how can we collectivize people, and through that collectivization, can they find greater voice, greater strength to be able to, represent their cases, talk about their aspiration, and that it finds perch in various planning processes. Um, Planning if we can make it truly bottoms up, it's about changing the equation of power, because through a process of planning you change how decisions are being made, and that's a change in power. Not that when we do the planning things necessarily happen that way, and that's one of the challenges I think we need to do as civil society. And being enabling through the citizens collective the processes of governance and participation, which is our Gram Sabha, the Gram Panchayat and its various subcommittees, that they meet, they function properly, the Gram Panchayat development planning processes, that they happen well, and being able to facilitate and galvanize this process. The 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 important thing to note, I would say, is I would posit is that civil society at some point, after being able to do this, the interface in between citizens and the state actors, and the interface between citizens and their elected representative bodies should be championed by citizens themselves and their collective. Civil society stepping into that will only risk undermining a long-term process of democratic evolution of society. And it may come up with some solves for some time, but it doesn't, a systemic problem doesn't get solved. So towards this is something that, the Rajpur is one of the, experiments that TRIF is doing. We have various other organizations working in close to 20 blocks in India, trying different things in different contexts, but primarily, on this basic idea that this is where the role of civil society comes in. If one can imagine, let's say the word, because we're using the word compact, reach some agreement, say between a state government or a district administration, that while this is taking place, would you enable it in some way by, let's say, the requisite support by a government order, saying that when these plans come up, would those bureaucratic elements at the block and the district level pay close attention? Can the collectors review what's happening to these plans? Can the BDOs review those things? There is also a space which is, I would call it as the complementary function of civil society, which could be technical support or facilitating, say, the basic process of people being able to access their entitlements through, having a smart app, or facilitating through a panchayat help desk or a block help desk. But the one key point is, do not subvert the democratic process as a consequence. And this is where I think we are making a departure from many past efforts. We know that UNDP, DFID, the EFAD, lot of organizations would, for efficient delivery of a program or a particular objective, set in place these technical support units in government, and they will embed people. Things will function well for some time. Sometimes these function well because a particular bureaucrat is very, positively inclined to that idea. But then the moment the bureaucrat changes, it may start falling apart. Or if you take the NREGA CFT model, the community facilitation teams, if the BDO is not very happy, things won't happen. The civil society won't get even paid properly. If the action of the civil society starts, let's say, pinching some local MLA or a power broker in a negative way, I'm sure word will be passed to say, look, scuttle these people and their efforts. But you will not be able to do these things if it is a citizen-led movement, which is great. That has a greater degree of stickiness, in my sense. I'll stop here. Huh? Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Zulfi. That's a lovely, sharp introduction to our discussion. Gaurav, let's hear from you now on experience on the ground.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Zulfi, for setting the context. I mean, we have very eminent panel here, and I'll not take much time. I'll put in my thoughts because I was just thinking that this session has been placed very suitably because in last few days we had good sessions around community collectives, their importance on gender, on markets and youth engagement. So I think overall purpose of these all intervention is to actually meet the aspirations of the community. So while I resonate what Zulfi has just mentioned about the sense of citizenship. So while these after the 73rd amendment, these Panchayati Raj institutions have been mandated with the work of development of communities, preparing a plan, implementing it, allocating resources for it, and monitoring it through various subcommittees. So the Panchayat is one body which is already there constitutionally. Then later in last 15, 20 years, 25, 30 years, there is a SHG movement which has happened. And now it has converged into National Rural Livelihoods Mission, wherein under UPSRLM, many community institutions have been promoted in terms of, these small self-help groups having 10 to 12 members in the group, and then this federating to the second level as village organization, and then at cluster level federations. So if we specifically talk about a revenue village or a panchayat may include more than a revenue village, but based on the population and geography. So if we talk about a village, initially when we thought of, when we conceived this Rajpur project, we thought there is already mobilized community base which is available on the ground in terms of village organizations and self-help groups. So the same women who is the member of self-help group is also a member of Gram Sabha and can reach out to Gram Panchayat. So, but surprisingly, there was no connect between these Gram Panchayat committees and also these self-help groups and village organizations. These were considered as two separate entities. I'll not, if you ask a SHG member or village organization leadership, they will not know what Panchayat's plan is, what they are doing. What resource allocation has happened, what kind of work we are going to take up under various schemes, Manrega and all. So there was no dialoguing between these two, and most of the time these were seen as the competitors for each other. Like Panchayat is also receiving funds from government, from 15th Central Finance Commission and State Finance Commission, Manrega and all, and village organizations were also in receipt of funds in terms of revolving fund, community investment fund. So these two institutions were already there, who were mandated to do the sort of meeting the aspirations of the local community. The resident of the villages. So this PRI CBO convergence thing came up there only. We thought of if we can create some forums, we can engage with both these institutions and create some sort of synergy, wherein the community, particularly women who have very less voices in the Gram Sabha, their presence was very poor. So if we can trigger the aspirations among community members, using the platform of SHG, VOs and all, to attend these Gram Sabhas and place their demand of work, what is actually required for the development of village. So these sort of activities started happening at Rajpur. Initially, it was a struggle when we talked to the panchayat representatives to go into the village organizations meeting, or village organizations people getting into the Gram Panchayat or Gram Sabha meetings. This was a little difficult, but over the period of time, there was a better realization that we both dream one dream. And if we both can collectively join our hands, I think we can achieve what we want to achieve. So the locality approach is at the heart of the community solutions. Keeping people and communities as the focus. The community is at the focus. People are in the focus. Building relationship between various stakeholders. focusing on developing strength. What are our strengths? What further needs to be done? Realizing aspirations and ensuring a truly community-led approach. So this is what we thought of when we took up this initiative. And then, so earlier the GPDP was prepared. I mean, even if TRI is not there or any CSO is not there, the GPDP, the Gram Panchayat development planning process will happen. So how this can be more participatory, how we can have voices and concerns of the local community into this entire process. So for that, I mean, like Neha was also mentioning in her opening remark, and Julfi also mentioned about the GPDP process. So the quality of the GPDP process, so quality of GPDP process can improve only if the community participation is increased to an extent. So small hamlet level plans were prepared, which culminated into a village plan, then village plan culminated into a GPDP plan. So what sort of action can be done? I mean, there are three sort of problems which were identified during the VDP process. One is what committee can do on their own. I mean, for which they do not need any support, which are largely around the behavior change, behavior communication, adoption of practices, and all. The second was around, where the committee can do, can solve those problems with little technical help. The third was, around the problems or issues on which they are completely dependent on the, the government to fund them, like construction of roads, Anganwadi building, A&M centers. So those sort of physical infrastructure activities can be taken up only through government. So these three sort of activities, when we club together, the infrastructure related activity went into the GPDP process, where the panchayat is receiving a lot of fund. The committee action plan is the plan wherein the no resources are needed, but only a adoption of practices is required. So that was there. And then also came the convergence plan, wherein what activities which are there in the already there in the sponsored by state or central government, how can we improve the outreach of these activities to them. But now a plan is ready. How will it get implemented, or it will get realized in actual terms? So the committee action plan, wherein the which we also call as zero budget activities. These were monitored by the local village organizations, the activities for which some technical support is required. The Gram Panchayat level standing committees, like on each domain, they have a committee, on the health issues, on education issues, on the infrastructure issues, they have a committee. So those where some technical help is required, the frontline workers of education department and the health department, they were contacted, and these issues were solved by them. So, but the third tier, where from where the most of the decisions are coming, which is local administration or block administration, that was not the part, into this entire process. So a good plan is nothing if it cannot be implemented. For zero budget activities, we have some sort of mechanism wherein we can chase the plan and understand what is going well, what is not going well. But for infrastructure related activities and saturating the villages with some sort of activities, we developed a process, which we call as compact, wherein this became possible because of concomitant procedural measures that we have taken up. We initiated a block level coordination committee was conceived, and it was made under the leadership of the CEO Janpad or CEO Janpad. At some places they are also called block development officers, or the district project manager of the MPSRNM. So they are in all the in this committee. We had a person who is deeply engaged in working with the CBOs, which is already there, the DPM SRLM, and then we also had the CSOs which are working in that area, and also the special invitees were the department whose work has to be where we have to pursue our work to be done. So these sort of compacts were organized, wherein they recorded their the progress and the challenges and what is the way forward. So in the next meeting, the follow-up meeting, the action taken report was shared. So through that, I mean, there was a lot of excitement among the local administration, particularly because, you know, collective voices always have a, you know, better voice. So instead of individual concerns, collective voices were heard, and, you know, the implementation of plan, because, you know, government, the excitement of government lies in numbers. So when we talk about the entire block, the numbers are good, and when they are reached, they also get sort of, you know, the satisfaction and the kind of appreciation that they get from their senior officials. So these block level compacts have solved many problems in terms of, you know, realization of the activities. And over the period of time, you know, while doing this process at the village level, improving the active participation of women and leaders in the Gram Sabha, we also engaged with youth. So in this entire process, some national leaders have come up, and unfortunately, the panchayat elections are are on hold in Madhya Pradesh due to COVID and all for more than 18 months from now. So they, particularly during the pandemic, the kind of response that we have seen in this Rajpur, particularly Rajpur and Jhabua, because Rajpur, you know, it borders Maharashtra, where the you know, the COVID cases was very high, the positive rate was very high. So these through these compacts, through these, you know, the convergence model, the PRI CBO convergence model, the isolation centers were established, wherein the VO and village organizations, community, Panchayati Raj institution members, GP members, they all came together. The panchayats gave their finance commission. There was some provision of 14th finance commission funds to for combating the COVID. So how this fund can be optimally utilized? They used it for creation of medicine kits for the patient, creation of isolation centers, and you believe me, I mean, within a month, the positivity rate in the Rajput block and in the entire Barwani was back to the normal. I mean, close to the national average. So overall, I mean, the collective action, the need of collective action, the need of reviewing, monitoring, and ensuring the resource allocation is what we have achieved through these compact forums here. So my views are basically from the point of view of a practitioner. So I consider myself as 20% academician and 80% practitioner. So these are the ground insights that we had, what we lived in last 3.5 years, 4 years time. And I'll stop here. I mean, thank you, Michael. I'll come again when there are questions. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Gaurav. Great to hear the experiences from the ground, and we'll hear more later. I now invite Harsh to get your perspective on this.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Zulfikar and Gaurav have given very rich, insights from what's happening at the ground level, and I will not try to duplicate on that. All of them are valid and really based on ground level evidence. I'll take a slightly different view on certain structural issues of rural. That how do we see the whole concept of rural in India? You know, we understand urban, small cities, medium towns, metro cities, and so on and so forth. Rural is an area where 60 to 70 or 80% of the people have lived. But what is the concept of rural? I mean, is it just everything that is non-urban? In urban areas, we have norms of infrastructure. We have many things. There are, of schools, colleges, social and economic infrastructure, etc., etc. What is the norm for life in rural areas? How do people live? How do they survive? How does capital accumulation take place? Millions of migrants who go out, what is their life like? How do they contribute back home to create a life of their own when they go back? So the point that I wish to make is that, especially now, we saw what happened during the COVID, how fragile the whole rural urban migration has been, etc., etc. And there was just a CMI report on CNBC yesterday that lots of people have had to go back to agriculture and to rural areas to eke out their livelihood after losing jobs and so on, and for various other reasons as well. Especially women who have gone back, have stayed back, etc. So the time now has come to really define what do we mean by rural exactly, and how do we see the developmental activities, including some of the democratic processes that Haider and Gaurav talked about. What is it that we are trying to do? Are we trying to make rural more rural? And if so, what is that? It's a slightly complex process. I wrote a book on Navodaya Shahar model, and this was specifically based on Bihar, the realities in Bihar and the solutions, etc., etc. And it's valid for many other parts of the country and and parts of even developed states. The basic concept which I said, which I try to put forward there, was that the specter of mass poverty cannot be removed by just focusing on income alone, etc. More package approach addressing the triple bottom line of the common person, which is access to assets, access to human development services, and a livelihood potential based on a combination of all these three has to be attempted. And especially in the case of Bihar, I found that its urbanization ratio was 13% as compared to 40 something of Tamil Nadu, etc., etc. And in some district it was as low as 6%, 7%, 8%, etc. Landlessness, on the other hand, was as high as 40 to 50%, especially among certain social classes, etc. So, you could enhance your, you could do rural-urban diversification or growth, but the choices which are open to many other places like Bihar, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, etc., were not available to Bihar. You could grow your urban areas, but still, there was a planning commission study, Niti Aayog now, that even by 2026, Bihar's urban-rural ratio will just stand at, 15-20% or something. From there, the concept of, the urban was born, that while Bihar should try to do its urban development the way, but the problem cannot be solved unless an intermediate tier of urban habitats are planned, are encouraged. And the best part of urban area will be to provide asset to the assetless from the nearby areas. That could be a very, it will not be so expensive. You could easily cross-subsidize the assetless people in the surrounding areas to come and set habitat there, and they will actually become the, an input into the growth asset. Now, such habitats develop as a normal course. Happens. When we travel on national highways, state highways, you see these chaiwala clusters, etc., etc. Land is very, very expensive there. It's as much as in Patna, in Katihar, on a chaiwala, that kind of a habitat. But there is no governance mechanism there. Therefore, all of them have deteriorated into squalors. So how do we? So when Zulfikar talked about a governance structure, etc., it's not just participatory. That's very important, of course. That needs to be done. But the whole interaction between government, civil society, polity, local population, etc., has to be around a vision of structural change. Rural areas need not remain rural areas just as they stand. they can combine the best of, you know, rural openness and urban kind of amenities at a certain level. And India now, if mass poverty and mass that kind of thing has to go away, those habitats, a vision of a very, very good inclusive habitat of that nature has to be thought through and implemented at scale. And they are all value accretive. It's not have to do a lot of investment there. The investment is really the people. You know, each migrant, when he earns, in my book, there is, I quoted certain studies from IIPA, Institute of Human Development, etc. 2/3 of the migrants who go out from Bihar to Delhi and other places want to come back. You know, because they say the urban areas where they have to live is very unhealthy and it's not nice. And so when they have earned enough, they want to, 2/3 want to come back, but they don't want to go back to a typical rural setting. They want to go back to a habitat where there are, you know, markets, there is transport available, there are cinema halls, etc. So how do we develop that? And, you know, now, there's another statistic that 90% of the earnings of a Bihari migrant at a certain level goes back in one health episode or for food and is gone in one health episode or the other. It does not add to the you know, asset base. So life is very risky also, you know, there. How do we create habitats which reduces the risk of people, give them access to amenities? And, you know, the small units that the migrants earn will be the real investment that can create these habitats. Government has to only create rules, regulations of democracy and development that we talked about. The rest has to be done by these forces. Now, based on that, I would like to make you know, many of the plans that I see at the local level of donor projects and etc. are too much micromanaged. You know, you put such levels of details to be managed that it becomes well nigh impossible to manage. How do we you know, put some real life, like you know, so that people's own initiative starts flourishing? You know, and there is need for less governance and management in that sense. What are those rules of the games that we can do? How can we configure development in that manner so that, you know, someone outsider does not need to come and plan everything and push people, etc. It has to be that way. One more point I'll make, Michael, is there is a very serious problem in terms of the skilling of rural youth, men and women. The whole structure which has been organized looks at rural youth as a feedstock into low quality urban jobs or urban factory kind of stuff, and not for rural areas' own development or thing. Some amount of agricultural training, etc. are happening. But that needs to change, and we need to look at training of skilling of rural urban men and women to serve the value chains which are in rural areas, the community services in rural areas. And let me flag an experiment that we did with some amount of success. You see, when we were talking to a place called Narsapur, where, you know, they were making, there's a lace cluster, etc. We were sitting in the household of an artisan. And they had two educated daughters. One had done BSc, one had done BCom, etc. So we said that, you know, what would you like to do? Would you like to, you know, go to Hyderabad and do some job? Or will you like to, if there are, and you know, in the same village, 65 common facility centers created by government under a mega cluster scheme were lying closed because there was no one to manage them. So we said, if you are given an opportunity to manage these and open these clusters, get them going, will you like to be a manager like that, or will you like to go to Hyderabad? They said, you know, we will get at the most 10,000 rupees to go to Hyderabad, we cannot manage our life there. No, definitely not. We would prefer if someone was to equip us to do these managerial roles. We could do a wonderful, it would be a great thing for us to become managers of these. So the idea was born that each family of artisan, farmer, etc. has now educated sons and daughters. But they don't necessarily want to be an artisan or a farmer, etc. They want more aspirational job roles. And then they will stay back and contribute well. So we developed to explore that a mini MBA program. That, a 6-month program where they were taken through certain amount of theory, but a lot of practice. And finally, we awarded the degree at ISB, and 100 women who we trained through that process, all of doing are excellent jobs. And the dream in this project was really that we should get the finest institutions in our country to partner with us, IIMs, IITs, all those which have been, created with public funding, must start also serving this tier of people. They are not supposed to just meant for us from urban areas and, Catholic schools. They must also in some way or the other, connect with these people and get enriched in the process. So part of the design was that, these people will go and, spend a week in IIM Ahmedabad or Irma or whatever, and handle. So the point that I want to make is, part of this rural transformation that we are talking about should also be to create a tier of leadership and managers from the rural areas themselves. And roping institution, India has made massive investment in terms of education and training. All those institutions must be roped in this process, and they will be better off for it. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harsh, for also emphasizing the need for a vision of alternative structural change with the question about how that is built effectively locally, and also for the centrality of meeting new aspirations. Great, thank you. Finally, Meda, over to you, and it's actually great to turn to a specific area of health.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you very much to Zulfikar, Harsh, and Gaurav for those really excellent remarks. I actually feel very inadequate speaking after you with the depth of knowledge that you have brought out. I'm not going to get into the diversity of the rural urban diaspora and all of the opportunities and challenges that it offers. I'm going to take a specific example of health, and I know both of you, actually all three of you, referred to the role that health plays and the connections that are established between health and poverty when we're looking at the populations that we are talking about. I think it's really important, and I'm not going to get into the constitutional frameworks that talk about centralization and decentralization, because I think the group here truly and fully understands that. But I do think it's important to understand, building off what Harsh was talking about, the shifts in the rural society, the demographics, and the whole amenities that are offered, and how are we approaching them? I mean, what is the quality parameter that we are defining so that we're able to provide respectful services, and who is really the custodian of those services as we are envisioning it? So there's this vision of the rural health, and if we look at the role that the National Health Mission has played, it's been a very critical role. When we talk about health being a state subject, and the role that the National Health Mission, a very centrally sponsored scheme, has played over the past decade, we've seen the transitions that has led to in terms of improvement of health infrastructure, the filling up the gaps for human resources that exist. So in terms of the building blocks, we've got a lot that has already been put into place. But where are the accountability mechanisms for people who are accessing those services? And to also a point that Harsh was highlighting, I'm going to take it a little far and stretch it to saying that the providers of those services, when they are at these health facilities, what are we doing to assure them of basic amenities like education, like quality of life for their families. What is it that we're doing to bridge those gaps, and how are we building those connects? And to a point that Gaurav had made of leveraging the role that elected representatives play and connecting the self-help groups and having that kind of transparency and understanding of the budgets that are made available and how are they being utilized, what are they being utilized for. It's not like there is a lack of funds available. There's enough and more funds available, but do we really know what those funds are for? And people who have to utilize those funds, act upon those funds, do they really have the wherewithal to be able to take those funds forward? Are we putting it forward in a language that is understandable and that is meaningful for the users, for the beneficiaries? If we look at the divide in the country, there's been so many islands of excellence. If we look at pieces, if we look at work that has happened in states like West Bengal, if we look at work that has happened in states like Kerala, where local bodies have played such a significant role in getting services closer to people. And, and then we look at examples that Harsh was talking about of Bihar, where the rural-urban divide is also so stark that there are huge challenges that we are up against. But even if we look at states like Haryana, which are sort of closer to the control centers in New Delhi, and the parallel bodies that are being created, how much of that understanding are we really building to be able to create an environment where it is serving the people and it's performing the role that is envisioned in the Constitution? I will go to the point of the 15th Finance Commission, which is where I think there is an opportunity that we hope we can leverage for health, and go back to a mechanism where going away from a bit of the centralized processes that have been established for health. So what the 15th Finance Commission does is allocate 70,000 crores for strengthening primary health care with an appropriate allocation for urban and rural local bodies to play an active role in 5 areas really. One being infrastructure. So really looking at providing for infrastructure gaps and construction for health and wellness centers, running of those health and wellness centers, acknowledging the role that has been played by local bodies, both rural and urban local bodies in COVID, and the connect that they have established with the community, being the closest representatives of the community to be responsive and try to build the road for drugs and diagnostics, which is a highly technical area, which will require a whole lot of hand holding and skill building to be able to bring them to that level, to be able to offer those support services. And also establishing hub and spoke model for strengthening surveillance, diagnostics and surveillance through block public health management units. So there's a range of things that are envisioned in the Finance Commission. And unlike other national initiatives where there is a fair bit of engagement and flexibility in utilization of funds, the 15 Finance Commission funds have been released to the states, and there is 10% flexibility for the state to be able to provide flexibility to local bodies to function on that. And if there is more than 20%, then it goes back to the national level. So there's all those kind of controls that are in place. And the original vision, as I understand, and I'd love to understand this better from you, was that it was a process when the central government was directly allocating funds to local bodies. And there was limited role that was envisioned at the bureaucracy level. All of you have alluded a fair bit to the advantages and the challenges that bureaucratic interventions offer. So right now there's this whole piece that there will be a state level committee, there will be a district level committee, the district level committee will be chaired by the district magistrate. So in effect, I mean, while it offers an opportunity for efficiency, does it really offer an opportunity for diversification and for the local body representatives to be able to express what they have to and to take on a leadership role in bringing health services closer to the people that they aim to serve as being the elected representatives? And I'd also like to bring in a dimension around the gender dynamics. Very often we hear that the representation of women in elected bodies is ceremonial, and that they are really mouthpieces for their families, for the men in the family, whether it's the husband, the son, the father-in-law, to really bring forward the point. But I'll again go back to, since Harsh so emphatically brought out the issues and opportunities and challenges from Bihar, taking the example of Bihar and the role that women elected representatives have played of engaging with the chief minister and really talking about and bringing to fore their challenges with the problem of alcoholism. So if there are women in leadership and they're offered those opportunities, and I do genuinely mean to say offered those opportunities, because if somebody's not had those opportunities, you need to give them a certain number of cycles to be able to express. And even in leadership roles, even in large corporates, there is enough evidence to say, and in advanced countries, in governments like Canada and the US, there is enough evidence to say that if there is a leadership role, women will think multiple times whether it is really them who can take on this role, while men will just genuinely and naturally think that, oh, this role is cut out for them. And women will need to be supported to say, oh, you can perform this role in addition to the 64 other thousand things that you do. Not to say that men don't do that, but it's just the biological construct and the social construct that we've lived with for so many years. And even in, if you look at the rural landscape or even the urban local bodies, wherever we've seen generations or at least 2 to 3 terms of women, not necessarily the same women being in power, they have played a critical role in improvement of resource allocation for issues that impact women and overall development, whether it's allocation of water resources, bringing water closer, addressing issues like education, addressing issues like access, which is roads being a very, very critical access, and looking at those things coming together, bringing health and sanitation coming together, which not only impact women and children, but impact all of the communities together. So there's this whole range of issues that are offered. And I think that this is an opportunity to build public finance mechanisms, to build an accountability where processes can be set in place with leadership from civil society organizations, working closely with the governments at the state and the national level, taking it down to the community level, at whether it's at the ward level or it's at the Zilla Panchayat level, defining what those processes would be. It's not like budgets have not been allocated in the past. So defining what that budget allocation is for, really breaking it down, and also explaining the utilization processes. So if you have that rulers code mechanism available, and there is clarity, and the users of that or the custodians of that budget don't feel that they will be penalized for utilization of that budget. If they see results and we can attach very clear outcomes, simple outcomes to, say, a strengthened facility or an established facility, available HR, and getting access to those services, quality services, defining parameters of those quality services, we will definitely see over a period of sustained engagement, improvements in quality and the shift to local governments taking an active role in ensuring better health services, like we've seen in many other states. I'm often questioned around, and I don't think I'm the right person to be questioned, but since I'm working closely with a couple of colleagues on this opportunity that the 15th Finance Commission offers, on the benefits or the challenges of centralization versus decentralization. And I do think that while there are certain advantages that centralization offers, when it comes to something as specific as personal as health, which because of various reasons is not a felt need. It's only when, preventive care is not a felt need for a large majority of people. And I'll pick points that all of you have made, that there's so many other livelihood challenges that people are facing that they don't have the time to think of it. And it's only when health becomes a grave emergency and that it pushes you into a cycle of poverty is when you realize that where do you have access and what is it that you need to do. And I think those are the places where local government representatives who come from the similar situations and are accessing services in the same place, which is fairly different from the urban construct, where there is a very clear divide in services that you access, whether it's education, whether it's health. So where there is a certain group of people, they access services, and then there's the informal sector that services are accessed. So there's, how do we sort of bridge that divide and have representatives of the community sort of come forward and be the custodians and those who are voicing, rather than having external people coming and doing being the champions of that voice. So that's really what I wanted to say, Michael, that this is an opportunity to strengthen quality of healthcare, to work towards better health status for women, children, and the communities, towards improved livelihood options, and to really see how we can create mechanisms where strong and clear fund flow mechanisms are available to really action and deliver on these decentralized processes for a stronger primary healthcare.
Great. Thank you very much, Meda, on focusing there. And I particularly welcome your bringing the gender dimension in, which is related to the broader point about the challenges to effect change in this strongly patriarchal and hierarchical system. And that often has a gender dimension. I also believe, and I know there's data actually, that when you have women in power, yes, sometimes it's ceremonial, but also we see real changes in resource allocation and practices. And I'm also a believer in the power of feminine leadership at bringing greater balance to decision-making. Okay, I want to pick up a few issues. I think there's been a lot of commentary in the chat, which resonates with what you've all been saying, about the challenge of the interaction between citizenship and the parts of the state. And that this is a tough challenge when often the culture of each is very different. Often the class or caste basis is very different. As Zulfi referred, of course, and there's the gender issue, but also the fact that the people who are most disadvantaged currently have least voice. So maybe I'd like to start with Zulfi on a question of how do you change the way the orchestra plays such that you both expand the capability for claim making on the one hand, and also get the state to be incentivized to deliver what actually Meda referred to as responsive services. Because that you have to get the state itself, it has to be aligned with the block level, district level, and higher level state operatives. How can we move forward on this?
Michael, just that one is how do you incentivize the state? And the first part was?
Well, I think the issue is how can claim making be made more effective so that,
okay.
And how can the state respond to that? It's not enough just that people make more claims. You need to have a responsive state as well.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, one thought I have is that there cannot be a substitute to, let's say, an accountable and effective state and its, duty bearers doing their job well. That's a broken piece, which, and it requires, like, as they say, who is going to bell the cat. But I think it will have to come through the democratic process. I mean, one can imagine if you look at examples of where some of these things have happened, you sometimes find, a good bureaucrat trying to push certain things, and then it results in, the officers and the bureaucrats functioning well, but then the leadership changes and the pressure is off. And I think it has to do with continued emphasis on upward accountability in bureaucracy and lack of downward accountability. How do we change it? And the state and its apparatus will have to signal, and there were mechanisms. For example, in Andhra Pradesh, long ago, when I think Mr. Hegde's government was there, they actually said that the confidential report of the collector of the district will be written by the Zilla Parishad president. And it created a lot of protest from the bureaucracy. For some time, there was noise, but everybody aligned. But the moment the government changed, within a matter of some months, the bureaucracy said, let's reverse this thing. But the fact was that it quietened down the voices, right? One key thing that we are finding, and there'll be others who can talk about it, that general disquiet with democracy at the local level. We continue to operate in a sense of, clientelism, of patronage, having to figure out if you know somebody somewhere and getting things done. It's not part of, what should become as business as usual. But some of it is possible. And so I'll hold that one particular thought.
I just comment on that one. That's a classic problem in politics, that a lot of us believe you've got to work through politics. A lot of politics is clientelistic now. How can a different form of politics evolve so it's politically aligned to make things work better?
Yeah. So that's where I think a few things come in mind. And, the example of Rajpur that Gaurav just presented and the film was on, one is to create many such examples where one can start seeing, and there's some of the results that are coming from Jharkhand, from Rajpur, from parts of Gujarat are quite fascinating, especially during COVID time. The response of these panchayats and these communities has been tremendous and literally cutting edge. In fact, there's one, and in Jharkhand, the first isolation wards at Gram Panchayat were set up in a block where this kind of process took place, and that became the policy of the state government within a matter of a month or so. Panchayats took risk; they used their monies to go and set up these centers and provide food, even though they were not sure whether they can do it and will they be penalized. So if we create sufficient such examples, does it build a demand pressure from other constituencies to say, why aren't we getting this level of services and this, the improvements that are happening? So there's a little bit of a bottom-up pressure kind of thing can also create that kind of a pressure. The other is stuff like, I'm just shooting from the hip, map constituency-wise data on progress on certain key indicators. That's where civil society and other actors come in. If you say MLA constituency and say, here is how the development indicators are changing, and just publish it, use local media. And then maybe somebody will say, look, this elected representatives in their constituency things are so bad. Why is the situation? Can that start changing things? And for that, we bring in these, that's where civil society, non-state actors can come in and play certain roles. The last thing I will say is, one of the big questions many of us have been asking is, can development pay political and electoral dividend?
Absolutely.
I think the jury is still out. And especially in India, I know that Transparency International at one time was doing these development compacts where they used to get elected representatives and administrative officials and and citizens to come together on a platform and make a declaration saying, we will do these kind of things, we will go for these results, developmental results. Overall, their analysis, especially from various countries in Africa, was it actually had a positive impact. Just the act of making an announcement, kind of it becoming your manifesto, did play a role. But I'll stop there for a moment.
Good. But I'd like to highlight the importance of local successes, which is then recognized at the higher level of the bureaucracy and the chief minister, creating the demand for copying. And of course, we like the great bureaucrat, they can maybe help and create them, but that is not alone. And absolutely, we don't want more project management units.
I'll just say one small additional thing. I think just one is about the building of narrative. I think when we talk about these things, we keep speaking in echo chambers. If we look at, say, in India, the general discourse about panchayats is decentralization of corruption. Here you have uneducated, illiterate people, you're giving them power. And the narrative within lower bureaucracy, especially, I'm not talking of the IAS officers, but the lower bureaucracy certainly is, we are the people, we went to college, we got this degree, we got this job, we are going to run the show. So if we can scaffold all these efforts by strong stories of what is possible through these kind of efforts, through CBOs and elected representatives and civil societies coming together, I think there is a chance to turn the narrative around.
Yep.
I'll stop.
Very good. We absolutely need better counter narratives. I want to go to Gaurav. A couple of things intrigued me about that you said about your process. You said at one point what your process was offering actually excited the local block administrators. And I think that's a crucial link, because there's a lot of resources in the system. If that can be used and activated in ways that make sense, because we know what's not going to change, as I think you said, is they have to report upwards and look good upwards. Yep. And I think that's related to something else either you or a commentator said, is how quickly can you go to scale? Because absent scale, good enough scale, there's not going to be the excitement above.
So see, the government is always target driven, like these many farm ponds have to be created. Yes, especially in UP, MP and the part of India where we are working. So they are target driven, and when their target are met easily in terms of, for any scheme, they have to identify the beneficiaries, they have to do the entire process. The list has to be approved by Gram Panchayat, the Pradhan or the Sarpanch has to approve this list. So this entire thing is already there in the village development plan. So out of that plan, whatever number of beneficiaries have been identified for a particular scheme, if they get this very easily, on a click of a button, if they can get the list of beneficiaries who have to be reached out under a certain scheme, and then their half work is done. And also, it is not only that they are excited. They are also, there is also a sort of pressure. The social audit sort of thing which were happening only once in a year earlier. Now with the engagement of these community-based organizations and youths in the villages, they have been trained. They have received training on the online applications wherein they can go and see what amount has been paid for which work by the panchayat. So these sort of, it is not only excitement, but it is also improvement in the sense of accountability and transparency within the mainframe system. So, one more thing, I was hearing Medha ji, Harsh and Dulfi. I think the status of women, the change in the, though it is a long, still there is a long way to go, but the women PRI members who were initially having only a proxy leadership, either their husband or their son or their somebody in the male member in their family was attending these meetings, at least they have started coming. Now we focus to have sort of focused intervention in the second phase of the project, but unfortunately this COVID happened and the election could not happen and we could not organize the sort of the training programs. But yes, the women's voice has improved in the overall system. And if we talk about government, like the district collector was very very excited to know these kind of forums, and he himself was continuously reviewing the progress which has happened, particularly around the pandemic situation, and the kind of result this PRI CBO and local administration compact has delivered. This was amazing. Now having these results in our hand, he himself has requested us to create a kind of district level forum of all the CSOs who can actually support in this kind of work. So some sort of local level upscaling is already happening, but yes, to make it formalize, I think we need to create more such successes in various geographies as Zulfi has suggested. And once these are done, I think we will have a good case in our hand. I mean, through the nudge units that we have at district and state level, we can push this, and this can be replicated over a period of time. Yeah, I'll stop here. You're on mute, Michael. You're on mute. Yeah.
Thank you. I just thought Anish is referring to Akhil Gupta's book on red tape, which talks about, I think it's based on work in UP, talking about the often structural violence that the state exerts or facilitates on citizens. Now, I'm sure there's some of that. But actually, and I know that happens, but I'm actually think there is much more scope to understanding the frontline bureaucrat as actually very disempowered. And that working over the potential to give the frontline bureaucrat incentives not to be in the work by Yamini of just being a post office, or not just reporting the wrong kinds of targets, but to transform their incentives. And this is where I'm actually also more optimistic than land on the flailing state. But anyway, that's a margin to work on. I want actually to go to Harsh now, because I think the question I have for you, Harsh, I thought is this: you're going beyond specific service. You're going to an area of how to develop a view of a different structure at the local level, which is a bigger. This is transforming, shifting to a new symphony in the metaphor of the day. I'd like you to hear more. That's a complex, tough problem. I don't think we want more even mega planning locally, but I mean, maybe. But how does that interact with the theme of the session of getting a more effective ecosystem of political, community, civil society, state action?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. See, I refer to the example of, the little hamlets where they sell chai and pakoras when you travel on the national highways. See, this is an automatic process of evolution of habitats, that those things start happening. Some of those initiatives come about, but they do not progress beyond a point because there is no mechanism for governance of those kinds of habitats. It is simply not on the public policy radar. And that is why they stagnate. And so if you are able to recognize proactively such things and provide for a governance framework of that, then with very little energy, basically what you are trying to do is to channel the natural energy at the habitat level for habitat development. And a related point that I want to make is there has to be a very, very strong emphasis on asset development. How do we create the asset base of habitats of people, etc., at that level? And it's a mutually reinforcing process. And so many things that you talked about in terms of participatory development, etc., is really comes down to a question of what is the stake of the common person there. No, there I have attended many workshops, etc., that we want people to participate and take the governance workload and etc., but does it make sense to a normal person to go that heavy? So what is the stake that we are creating for the common person is an important question to ask. And for me, strengthening the asset base at the local level in very backward areas, etc., is the way to create that state.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, very useful.
I don't know if I've answered your question, but
well, it's a big. You're putting a big question on the table because you've also got to solve you've got to recognize the need for change, build the assets, and solve some of the coordination problems that involve a whole set of actors. Thanks, Harsh. Meera, I'd like to pick up a theme that I've heard here, but also I think comes globally, that to have effective local change, the behavior of the center, in this case, it would be the Indian state. I mean, that's in Madhya Pradesh or UP, how they behave, you referred to a good feature of the finance commissions, that the actual procedures are going to be at the state level, which is very good. But how can the state channel what was somebody, or maybe you, referred to as different rules of the game, such that it provides the structures for both better designs, better planning, and a responsive state at the local level? Do you have any thinking about that in your area?
That's a really, really good question. And I think the first thing that should be permissible in this whole process is to have the ability to fail. Yeah. If we are going to put that trust in local governments, which we have not done for a really long time, we need to allow them to be able to experiment and to give them that confidence that they have that space to be able to understand what that fund allocation is for, and to have simple mechanisms and easy to understand processes whereby they're able to realize the budgets that are usually allocated. If you look at the construct of the Rogi Kalyan Samitis, which is the user fee collectives that are created at a health facility, they usually go unutilized, and there is the local government representation on that. Other than states like Gujarat, I have not really seen RKS really getting utilized, and that's primarily because the construct of what it can be used for is so vague, and the whole concept of untied fund is really inviting problems for your own self to be able to utilize, that everybody says that, we'll let this fund be wherever there is very clear descriptive guidelines that this is exactly what it can be used for at as much quantity at so and so time. People are only wanting to exercise those safe rules. So if we are able to really and truly take forward decentralization and create those mechanisms where there is an opportunity to try and fail, there's an opportunity to have governance mechanisms where you're at least having the ability to experiment and to localize. And what I'm hoping that in the true spirit of the 15th Finance Commission, as it offers, that there are these national guidelines, and the state is supposed to adapt it to state level guidelines, and there are supposed to be district level guidelines. So there is a whole lot of bureaucracy that is involved, but at least there is a provision to understand that there needs to be customization, but also acknowledging the fact that while those guidelines are still being finalized, budgets have already been released. So there is that process and that pressure that budgets have been released, and that it's not going to, whether it's going to be a rollover fund or not, how is that going to be utilized? So there are those complications and politics around it. But I think if we have the ability to learn from failure and build better, robust programs, and have the active engagement of not just local bodies, but civil society that can walk together and strengthen these processes, I think we may have an opportunity. I'm an optimist. I am an optimist of slow processes and change. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get some islands of excellence here.
Very good. Great. We've just got 3 minutes left. I want to make a final comment, but do any of the panelists have a 30-second intervention that they want? Not now. Okay. Well, I think.
So another thing, Michael,
yes.
I would like to add.
30 seconds. Correct.
Yeah,
go.
Only 30 seconds. Only 30 seconds. Yes. So the kind of excitement you were talking about, the realization of the activities that were placed before the district and block administration. I mean, the mobilization of resources. I mean, when the realization of activities identified in the VDP happened, I mean, it was, like what 50 to 60% of the activities which were supposed to be implemented on the infrastructure part were actually at least initiated in the village. The funds were allocated and they were initiated. So that gave a sort of confidence in the community and in the government itself to believe in these sort of forums. And the recent success that I shared that now the district collector himself has requested TRIF to create a kind of forum at the district level wherein all the CSOs can support the way TRIF has supported, I mean, our Rajpur intervention. The similar kind of mechanism can be put in place. I mean, this compact has such a beauty. I mean, it has so much potential. In 3 months' time, only in 3 months' time, during the first wave of COVID pandemic, I mean, in around 10 blocks in Madhya Pradesh and in 7 blocks in Jharkhand, we were able to connect different, households with 2 lakh households with the rights and entitlements.
Okay.
So this is the potential that this kind of forum has. I mean,
great.
I'll stop it because there is really less time. Yeah.
Good. Well, we've got to wrap. I would like just to say, thank you to the panelists and to all the comments from the audience. And I think to go back to compact, I think that this only reinforces that the idea of a compact is very important, but we have to recognize that what we're really after is a more dynamic, interactive shifting in the social contract to change how the local interactive system works, and that this has big challenges in each of the areas of really deepening democracy to make that effective, to make the state, to understand what the state needs in terms of the government and to change its behavior, and also to build the capability for claim making, especially for the disadvantaged group, recognizing gender differences, and finding spaces for this to work is crucial. And the theme that discovering success is really important for progress. And it's in a way heartening that while COVID has been so devastating for India, but there actually this has created some cases of this kind of interaction, which I hope can be built on and can be successes that can be built on. So these are really tough challenges. That's why we're all in different ways engaged in the development process. They're also exciting challenges. Thank you to all. Over to you. And I think that with that, Neha, we are closing the session and looking forward to a continuing dialogue.
Yeah, thanks to all. And it was very enlightening session, and particularly from the practitioner's point of view, this conversation is being referred as a kind of reference and a kind of way forward for us. So thanks all. And with 2 lines which is actually written by Hindi poet Balli Singh Cheema ji, ले मशाले चल पड़े हैं लोग मेरे गांव के, अब अंधेरा जीत लेंगे लोग मेरे गांव के. So with this spirit, let us move forward.
Wonderful, Neha. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.